Hi. Today we're taking a look at corrugated picks. And this camera is going to come into focus here in a second. You can see the corrugation on this pick. But also there are some letters there in cursive. And since they're not focusing that well on this particular pick, oh, there it goes. But those letters right in the center are DA. I'm going to see if we get another example up here, maybe a little more clear. And if you've been following those videos, you know DA stands for Deandria. There it is. Cursive D there, and just below it, down to the right, is the A, cursive A. Deandria stamped so many of their picks. All of their picks, just about, in fact, from the 1950s through the 70s, with that stamp. And there are some examples of it going back to the 30s as well. But we're looking at least 9 different types of corrugation here, 15 different shapes. All the picks you see on the black strip there, none of those are Deandria. The top row is Deandria. Excuse me there. And let's just go through them a little bit and see what we got going on here. All these here, this was perhaps the oldest one, these two, going back to the 50s, early 60s, but all these are from the 50s up through the 70s. And these were standard Deandria shapes that featured corrugation here. A couple of interesting things going on here. This is one of their smallest picks, the 358.5, and here's the 348. Neither of them were ever shown in any catalog as having corrugation, but they are Deandria picks, and they have corrugation, which tells me it was an experiment or just a fluke. And it's always nice to have something rare and different like that. I'm moving down here to the second row. You can see we have a few different shapes here. And even a army brown. Army brown was a color Deandria used in the 1930s. Let's see if we can't get a look at that corrugation. Wow, how different that corrugation is from the first corrugation. As you can see there, oh, look at that DA show up on the left. My, that looks sweet. 2 different types of corrugation there. Moving over, we're going to see some more variations of corrugation. Now, they might look the same, but those dots are spaced out differently and pressed differently. And the grid is just not quite the same. It is a square grid, but not quite the same. Moving down here, these 3 at the bottom are our oldest. 2 on the left have the same style of corrugation. And one on the right obviously has a different style of corrugation. Look at that. And look at the celluloid color, too. See that white background? Gives you an idea of those different smoky blends of brown and amber that were so common during the vintage era. Moving over here, we have yet another type of corrugation. And this is a hand-beveled pick, probably going back to the 20s. It doesn't have a DA stamp, but may very well be a Deandria with a different corrugation they used. Now, the one on the right here, it's even iffy if this should be called corrugation, because I showed in a late 20s Bruno catalog being advertised amongst some other guitar picks. And you really have to see it in the advertisement to make that distinction. It's such an unusual type of corrugation. So unusual my camera cannot even adjust to it. There, I wanted to get you a good photo of it. Wow, is that different? And thanks to my friend Guy DeViles for that, who traded it to me in a pick trade that we have. Going down here at the bottom, we even have a Japanese model, and I had to include that because this triangle here, the Americans never featured a triangle in corrugation or with a cork grip, in fact. The Japanese did cork and corrugation on the triangle shape, and the Germans did cork on the triangle shape, but the U.S. never did neither. Now, this one does have a Japan stamp, obviously. Nothing to figure out there. We know where it comes from. But these two here don't have a Japan stamp. And this one on the left, it has features of a 351, consistent with those made in the 1960s by the Japanese. And if you can't, notice the difference in the shoulders right there between these two picks. They're not the same. And if we overlap these picks, we could clearly see they are two different picks. And that's one way of comparing sizes. When you want to compare sizes to see if something is the same, overlap one to another, but don't try to center it. Push it as far to one side or the other like that, and then see if there's any overlap on that side. And as we could see, this does in fact have overlap. Now I have it all the way to the edge there on the right, and it has a huge amount of overlap actually. So it's a wider pick, but not quite as long. And it's not the same symmetry as the DeAndrea right here. So that's probably a Japanese pick without the Japan stamp. This could go either way, no Japan stamp, but it might be a DeAndrea from their middle period, 1940s, because they did have a shape like this, but then again, so did the Japanese. So that's undetermined right there. If I were pressed to determine what it actually was, I'd probably go with Japanese. These remaining 8 picks down here, you'll see there are four different shapes, or excuse me, 7 picks in 4 different shapes. And these last 3 sets of banjo picks, or excuse me, mandolin picks, because they're long and slender, were obviously offered in shell and white. And that's why I chose to show duplicate shapes, just to let you know that they do come in different colors. You could find corrugation and cork grips on different backgrounds and colors. And that's so cool that they made them this way. It's so different. And I never knew about these picks till I actually got into pick collecting. And here's a nice wide-banded celluloid, probably going back to the 20s or 30s, right here. And you could see what it has in common with that one. This is coming from our Chicago manufacturer. These down here is yet to be identified. The one that was so prominent in producing tiger stripe celluloid. And I know the lighting's a little bad today, folks, so I really appreciate you staying with me again. And let's see if there's just one last thing before I go. I could just grab a few of these different types of corrugation, throw them up here, just to show you the differences you'll run into if you're an observant pick collector, especially of the vintage variety. I think that's really piqued my interest, is learning about guitar picks and observing all the nuance among them. So I hope you enjoyed our little video here on corrugated picks. There's also some featured in the earlier grips section, and we'll be coming back and touching upon corrugated and cork grips later on among some other special groups that we're going to run into. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you later.